Groundwater during drought. This video will detail drought classification and what happens when groundwater levels fluctuate under drought conditions and how that affects New Hampshire residents that rely on wells for drinking water. Drought area and severity is set by the U.S. Drought Monitor based on data provided from hydrologists measuring lake levels, stream flows, dam levels, and groundwater levels, forest rangers monitoring forest health and fire conditions, the agricultural industry reporting on the growing season, including apples and maple syrup, and input from the ski industry. These entities and more make up the drought management team that reports on where and to what degree drought impacts are occurring. The U.S. Drought Monitor sets drought based on 5 different classifications, D0 to D4. The most common, D0, abnormally dry, is the onset where there is short-term dryness and we begin to see water deficits and crops being affected. D1, moderate drought, is when we observe delays or damage to crops, stream, lake, and groundwater levels drop, and voluntary water use restrictions are usually put into place. D2, severe drought, is when crop losses are likely, water shortages are common, and water use restrictions are imposed. The highest levels of drought, D3 and D4, are less common. D3, extreme drought, has been classified in New Hampshire only a few times between 2000 and 2022. In D3, we have major crop losses and widespread water shortages. D4, exceptional drought, is very rare. Let's review the 2020 to 2022 drought. This began in the spring of 2020 and increased throughout the summer. That fall, we saw worsening conditions. Typically, we want to see drought conditions be relieved in the fall as we head into winter. However, in late 2020, portions of New Hampshire were still in extreme drought, sparking worries of a multi-year drought and dry spring conditions. There was some relief that winter, however, with low snowpack and low spring recharge. In the spring of 2021, moderate and severe drought conditions covered the entire state. July of 2021 brought unprecedented, record-breaking rain to New Hampshire, relieving the drought conditions in most areas. However, drought in the northern part of the state continued through the winter of 2022. As we entered into the summer of 2022, most of the state was abnormally dry, which led to severe and extreme drought conditions in the late summer. Thankfully, with fall and early winter rains, the multi-year drought was ended in January 2023. To understand how drought affects groundwater levels, we need to learn the different types of aquifers and wells that we have here in New Hampshire. The 2 main aquifers, sediments or formations with available water, are sand and gravel aquifers and bedrock aquifers. Sand and gravel are sediments that lie above the bedrock and are influenced by the water table. Dug wells and point wells, which are shallow, 25 feet deep or less, are installed by hand or with an excavator. Water levels in these wells naturally fluctuate 3 to 7 feet over the year. Gravel wells are also influenced by the water table, however installed with a drill rig deeper into that aquifer. They can be 50 to hundreds of feet deep. Greater than 90% of private wells in New Hampshire are bedrock wells. Bedrock wells have a solid casing installed into competent rock. Then they have an open borehole where water enters from fractures, veins, or cracks in the rock. The water level in a bedrock well is driven by the pressure of water flowing through those fractures and will not match that of the sand and gravel aquifer. It is difficult to determine where fractures are in the rock, how they're angled, and where the water is coming from. 2 bedrock wells in close proximity may yield different volumes and have very different water quality, as the fractures supplying water to the boreholes may not be the same. Watch our wells and groundwater aquifers under drought conditions. The water table aquifer is connected to surface waters, lakes, and rivers. Water levels will rise and fall. It may fall below the lakes and streams, causing them to lose water to the groundwater system as well as through evaporation. The water table may fall below dug wells. These are the first to observe the impacts of a drought. If a dug well goes dry, water filled from the surface will just flow out the bottom. A lower water table creates a smaller column of available water in gravel wells, yet these wells are more resilient to drought over dug wells because water enters from deeper in the aquifer. In drought, shallow bedrock fractures may contribute less recharge to the deeper bedrock fractures. Fractures may go dry or lose pressure, and this can change water availability and cause major water quality changes. Over the years, we've become more resilient to drought. Dug wells have been replaced with deeper wells, bedrock wells may have been deepened or hydrofractured, and homeowners have learned to share their resource or connect to a public water system that has redundancy and is more reliable during droughts. Rain relieves droughts. Heavy rain, 2 to 3 inches of rain that falls over just a few hours, does not give us this relief, however. Rather, it floods and runs off the ground surface instead of infiltrating down into the groundwater system. To get out of a drought, we need rain to fall at a slower rate over multiple days and multiple events. This is when we see our reservoirs and streams have continual recharge. The sand and gravel water table and bedrock fractures begin to fill up from groundwater infiltration. Bedrock fractures do not typically recharge as fast as the sand and gravel. Therefore, bedrock wells may experience symptoms or impacts long after the drought has occurred. Depending on drought severity, it can take 18 months to years for the capacity and water quality in a bedrock well to return. So what can we do? Always practice water conservation. Utilize low-flow toilets, shower heads, and EPA WaterSense appliances. Limit your outdoor water use, don't let a hose run for hours, and make sure your irrigation system has good timers and rain sensors. If water use restrictions are in place, follow them. Raindrops, surface water, groundwater, and drinking water is all connected. It's important that we do our part to understand it and protect it. Brought to you by Edgewater Strategies and Ember Creative Company.